days like this and games like this do not come around very often, so we have to savour this. We have to really enjoy it. So here comes a preview, the first of the previews. There will be more on the Champions Cup final this weekend between Leinster and Toulouse, the two greatest club rugby teams in the Northern Hemisphere. And because the Champions Cup is, in my humble opinion, as close as you can get to international rugby without it being international rugby, I also think this is the two greatest club rugby teams in the world. And it is therefore, with the two of them going head to head, the ultimate matchup. Both of these teams have gone to 8 Champions Cup finals in their history. Toulouse have won 5 of those finals to be the most successful club, and they're out on their own ahead of Leinster, who have 4 titles to their name. So will Leinster join Toulouse as equal greatest, or will Toulouse extend their claim as to being the greatest? There is so much on the line for this one. I'm Tim, this is Egg Chasers. If you love your club rugby, it really helps me reach other people and introduce them to how awesome this competition, this matchup is. Drop a comment, give the video a thumbs up. I'd love it if I'd earn your subscription as well. But I mean, just look at it. The last victory for Leinster, 2018. I mean, they've come as close as you can come in the last couple of years. But it was, 6 years ago since their last victory. That said, quite a few of the guys that will be involved on Saturday were involved on that day. So they've got a lot of pedigree in their side. As for Toulouse, they've won more recently in 2021, one of the greatest photos in rugby history as well. Will the ski masks be out again? We will see. Just to put it in context about how tight people are expecting this to be, the bookies, who are normally pretty accurate on these things, they've got Leinster winning by 1. I mean, it does not get more of a knife edge than that. You look around the pitch as well, and from shirt number 1, where it's Andrew Porter up against Cyril Bay, 2 of the greatest loosehead props in the world going head to head, right through to shirt number 15, where it will likely be Hugo Keenan against Thomas Ramos, and every jersey in between, and all the guys on the bench. These two teams are stacked. There's a psychological challenge for both as well. Think about it. Leinster coming off the back of heartbreak in the last 2 finals against La Rochelle, having to have sat with that one and pore over what happened those 2 years. The fans have been through the ringer. No win since 2018. Toulouse equally, yes, they won in 2021. They got the top 14 title last year. However, the last 2 years in the semi-final, they have been panned by Leinster. Convincing victories. Let's just take a step back for a second and look at the occasion and the day. The Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is truly very, very special. I've seen games there and it's a special place. The noise that it generates, the atmosphere is going to be amazing. The weather looks okay as well. I'm currently today looking out my window and it is hammering down with rain, and that's the forecast for the next few days, but looking better for Saturday. And also, the man in the middle will be Matthew Carley. Now, I think the English referees are the best in the business. That's my personal opinion. I think Luke Pearce is the best of the lot of them, and I would like to have seen him taking the whistle for this one. Matthew Carley, what would I say about him? He's got a kind of school teacher vibe. He's very accurate, very detailed, sometimes appears a bit pedantic, loves to sort of see what's going on at the breakdown. So I think there will be breakdown penalties, and who is going to take advantage of that and manage the referee the best could be influential. And I'll come on to some of the matchups around the pitch that could have a say in that one as well. Also, look at the Leinster attack. When you compare the 2 attacks, Leinster are all about shape, intricacies, running lines, everyone running different angles, the defence not knowing where it's going. And what we've seen in the last 2 years against Toulouse is that Leinster attack has just compressed Toulouse. It made them really narrow, and you end up with guys like Dan Sheehan and Ryan Baird hanging out on the wings and making hay. As for Toulouse, so if Leinster are all about shape, Toulouse are all about instinct. They've kind of got a cat and mouse approach to the way they play rugby. They can slow it down and then speed it up, and they just bang, they're gone. The second there's a half gap, no one reacts better than Toulouse, and bang, they're gone, which is why you can never switch off. Concentration is going to be massive. Switch off for a minute, bang, bang, 2 tries, game over. And so many things to look for. Also, tactically, don't forget the DuPont law, so-called, is still in operation. That loophole isn't closed until the 1st of July. So you will still get the big Toulouse forwards ambling around in the middle of the park while the kicking battle's going on. And tactically, who's going to get on top there, and what has Leo Collins, Jacques Nienaber and co got up their sleeve for that one. We're gonna see. In terms of the individuals that I would just pick out as being especially influential in this game, and like I say, I've got a combined team that I'm going to go through at the end of the video, so stick around for that. Where who would you pick if you had access to both squads and you could pick one 15-man team? I'll go through that in a minute. But in terms of individuals, Jack Willis has been sensational this season. I mean, it pains me that he won't be available for England this summer. I don't know why an England team wouldn't want one of their players playing for a team as good as Toulouse with players as good. And Jack Willis has got so much better since he's gone to Toulouse. His attacking play is transformed, but his defensive play was always world class. His breakdown work is incredible, and he could be a difference maker for Toulouse. I've already mentioned Matthew Carley, the referee. When Jack Willis, and he's very intelligent at choosing his moment, when he's on the ball, he's very hard to shift. So what have Leinster got up their sleeve to deal with that threat? Equally, on their side of things, Caelan Doris, truly world class. His rugby brain, he's a rugby savant. He just sees things and feels the game in a way that most people don't. The way he just kind of floats and then pops up with a massively important intervention, both sides of the ball. Who gets on top between Jack Willis and Caelan Doris? Albeit they're not the same position, but they're both in the opposite back rows. Who gets on top in that particular matchup, for me, could go a long way to dictating the quality and the speed of the ball that Jamison Gibson-Park and Antoine Dupont get, because they are the two best scrum halves in the world right now, and they are so influential, obviously, to how their teams play. Looking back at the recent history, and it's been one-way traffic. Look at last year at the Aviva Stadium in Dublin, 41 points to 22. I was there for that game, and it was a beatdown. I was really, really excited ahead of that one. And then very quickly it was clear this game is done. And 41 points to 22. It's actually quite a surprise when you look at the scores down the years, because in 2022, 2 years ago, again in the semi-final, Leinster cruised to a final 40 points to 17. They pumped them. And then, I mean, they did play in the pool stages 5 years ago. Leinster won both of those games as well. 30 points to 12, 29 points to 13. What I take out of those fixtures is how many points Leinster scored and how few points Toulouse scored. Toulouse, who can score just like that, couldn't do it against Leinster. And that is because they have a blue, oppressive wave, which is only going to get better by the presence of Jacques Nienaber this year. His defensive... I mean, Leinster looked to me like their defence has stepped up. And this man, you think, is at the heart of that. And will that make it even harder for Toulouse to score? They don't... The last couple of years, they haven't been able to crack that Leinster nut. Is Jacques Nienaber going to make that even harder? Or what does Toulouse have up their sleeve? Like I say, Leinster are oppressive, relentless. And we saw that matchup in the Ireland match when they went to France to play in Marseille against France in the Six Nations, and again it was a beatdown, not dissimilar from the way that Leinster have got on against Toulouse the last couple of years. And to me, when I piece those bits together, I can't see anything besides a Leinster win. I don't see it being a blowout like the last couple of years, but I do see a Leinster win. The bookies have got it as a 1 point Leinster win. If I were making a prediction, I might say Leinster by 8, Leinster by 7, maybe, yeah, Leinster by 7, Leinster by 1 score. But I see Leinster winning, although what are the lessons that these two teams have learned? Let's have a look at that, because I'll come to Leinster in a second. We know how Leinster manage the resources of their players. The size and quality of their squad means that they can. But have a look at this. Peato Malvaca, pivotal player. He played in the Rugby World Cup warm-ups, Rugby World Cup, Six Nations. He's played 13 times for France this last season. Quite a lot, right? He has started all 7 Champions Cup matches for Toulouse. Starting to rack up the number of appearances he's made. His body might be getting a bit tired and fatigued. Wait, he has only started 4 top 14 matches this season. We've just had round 24 of the top 14. Peato Malvaca has only started 4 of those games. Isn't that an amazing stat? And I think what we're seeing here is Toulouse having a look at Leinster and trying to ask themselves the question, why is it at the end of the season at the semi-finals we're getting blown away? And I think that might be a factor. And they have managed the resources of their squad much, much more. Partly because it's a World Cup year, but I think partly because they've recognised that they've got to semi-finals in the last 2 years and have not been at the races. I don't think that's going to happen in the same degree this year. Compare Piatto Malvaca to Dan Sheehan, and Leinster have always done this, but it's very similar. Dan Sheehan in the Rugby World Cup warm-up, Six Nations, he's I think it was 8 times he's played. Now, that's partly because he was injured through some of the World Cup and the warm-up. So he's played fewer international games than Piatto Malvaca, but very similar stats on Champions Cup and URC. Dan Sheehan has also started all 7 Champions Cup games, and he's only started 3 URC games all season. So since the World Cup, Sheehan, Malvaca basically played the same amount of rugby. I find that really interesting. But Leinster, across their whole squad, do this a bit more. James Lowe, for example, has only made 6 appearances for Leinster all season. 6. 5 in the Champions Cup and 1 URC appearance. Partly because of injuries, but nonetheless, he is fresh as a daisy. So Toulouse have learnt their lesson. Have Leinster learnt their lesson? The last 2 years they've gone into the final rusty, having rested up their players too much. Leo Cullen said that he wouldn't do that this time, and then I know there were some Leinster fans getting a little bit twitchy and a little worried. Is history repeating itself because they rested up the majority of their first team squad against Ulster at the weekend? It will only be 2 weeks. The last time the Leinster team that takes the field for the Champions Cup final will have played will be 2 weeks, because they did play in the URC last weekend before last. And the game just gone at the weekend gave some game time to Hugo Keenan and to James Ryan, who could be back in the frame for the final as well. So I think they're going to be all right. I think, bottom line, both teams have learnt their lessons. When you look at personnel, like I say, Hugo Keenan's had some game time under his belt. I think he will start. I think Tomás Ramos will start at fullback, maybe Kinghorn onto the wing because of the goal kicking, which could be so important. Gary Ringrose, though, he hasn't played. So can they pick him? I don't think they will. Could you put him on the bench? Would that be a risk? Jamie Osborne's been really good as well. What I've got to finish the video then is a combined 15. So this is if you took both squads and you pick one 15-man team out of it, not based on historic form, based on form right now, and based on what the teams are likely to be this weekend. So I've discounted Gary Ringrose, for example, because he just hasn't played. But this is what I've gone for in my combined team. Tell me what you think. 8 Leinstermen, 7 Toulouse players. 5 Leinstermen in the pack, 4 Toulouse players in the back line. You start to see where there might be a little bit of an edge. Although I will have to say that the caveat here is I'd quite happily have Cyril Bay, Piatto Malvaca and Dorian Aldegheri, because that's an international front row as well. So a lot of these positions, it's so hard to pick. I'd quite happily have Thibaut Flamont as a lock. I mean, that matchup, by the way, Meafu McCarthy, that could be explosive. That little matchup of the enforcers. I can't wait to see that one as well. But you see a couple of areas where each team might have an advantage. I think the front 5, Leinster could have an advantage, which is mad to say because Toulouse are huge. But I think Leinster are better. Equally, half-back. I think Toulouse undoubtedly have an advantage there with Romain Ntamak being back and fit. I think if I were to pick the 2 positions on the pitch where there is the biggest step up from Leinster's player to Toulouse's player, or the inverse, I would say it is at number 8, where I think Caelan Doris is a big step up from Alexandre Roumain, and fly half, where I think Romain Ntamak is a big step up from Ross Byrne. Those 2 could be really, really pivotal in this one. As I've said, I see it going Leinster's way, not by a lot, maybe by a score. The bookies have it by 1 point. This game is going to be absolutely box office. How much will psychology play into it? The memories of the last 2 years for both teams. Toulouse losing to Leinster, but Leinster losing in a final. It's so many fascinating subplots with this one. Either both teams are going to be sat there with 5 stars above their crest after Saturday, or Toulouse are going to be out on their own as the greatest. Which way do you think it's going to go? This is just the start of the previews that are coming for this weekend. When the teams are announced, obviously I'll have another one. In the meantime, I would love it if you'd help me spread the word about how good this matchup, this competition, and hopefully you agree this channel is, by giving the video a thumbs up, dropping a comment down below, and hit the subscribe. I will see you on the next one.